the value of the license, to me, it's worth nothing. And I think that these OPDL clubs or even the TFC Academy are putting a program out there that looks anything like what a professional academy actually looks like. And do you think that we're hired based on the perception and the assumption that they would be the best possible candidate, the best people, the most qualified people to do that?
We're back. Episode number 4, I think. Number 4, right? Number 4. Yeah, we're back with Richard. By popular demand.
Very popular.
This is one we had circled on the calendar for a while. First episode with you was unreal. It was great. A lot of good talks, and I remember talking to you at the end of the episode, we were saying that we could have gone on for another 2-3 hours. So this one, we got a little bit more time, which is nice. We've got a lot of burning questions, not only from people within our demographic, but even Adam and myself, we want to pick your brain a little bit. There's definitely some things that we got to go over. But yeah, I mean, just to kind of circle back with everything, for those of you who haven't seen the first episode, I came into contact with Richard through Adam because Adam played with the national team, and you were over on the women's side with Team Canada over during the Pan Ams. So that's kind of how all of this came together. And it's a full circle moment since then, right? Like
I think we met each other because we noticed that we had the same sweater, which was only, that weird thing from Hudson's Bay Company or whatever.
Exactly.
No one else wears this sweater.
I'm pretty sure you still have it too, right?
Yeah, I do.
It's a unique one. But yeah, I mean, you guys, both of you, it's funny how it worked out. You guys met at the top of the pyramid, you could say, here in Canada.
Yeah, for Canada.
Top of the pyramid here in Canada. But that kind of brings us into our first point. We have 2 of the most knowledgeable people when it comes to sports science, and then obviously on the pitch doing your thing. You guys were at the very top of the chain here in Canada. What are some of the things that you've seen here that you saw down in, like, when you were working in South America, some of the similarities, some of the differences, all that kind of stuff?
I'll go first, maybe? Sure. Well, definitely when I went to South America, I would say that's when I kind of realized what the differences were, because I had traveled before for sure, and even with the national team, I'd been to many different countries and all that, but I didn't live there and stay there and all that. Going to Uruguay was the first time I did that, and so I started to pick up on many things. I mean, I guess the first that I noticed right away was, and maybe this sounds a bit cliche, but to me it's true, is that, well, the culture is different. And that you notice it because you notice that everybody is talking about the game, people you meet and hotels and restaurants and whatever, everyone. And it's not just that they're aware of what's happening with, let's say, the Uruguayan national team or some of the big clubs or whatever. Like, they know what's going on with your team, they know the second division. They're following their own local thing as well as the more popular teams, and so that was a difference in culture. I started to notice how, again, it's a little bit cliche, but I did see kids playing, whether it was on the street, in their backyard, in their little area of grass around their apartment where they lived. You saw all this stuff, and it's not that you don't see that here in Canada, but first of all, half of the year it's too cold to even do it, and you don't know if anyone's doing it. But even in the summer, it just isn't something that you see all the time, just kids with a ball by themselves, and then groups of kids just kind of playing and kicking it around, and so I saw that. Then once I started working, well, then, it was when I noticed that the professionalism of the players. I was in a middle tier second division club, so not a big club, never mind wealthy. I mean, the club I was with had nothing, literally nothing. But the players, there were some of the older players that some of them had played even in some of the top clubs in Uruguay. One had been in Brazil. There were some that had a little more experience, and those guys sort of set the tone. Everybody involved was really professional. They started calling me profe, and that was something which is sort of, I guess it means professor really, but so it's something they called it, the fitness coach and all that. But it was very respectful. I had come straight from TFC before I went there, and I wasn't treated with that level of respect at TFC. And TFC is, the top club or whatever. And so they were respectful, they were professional, there just wasn't any, what would I say, like, it was clear that they took things really seriously. Everyone was going to bed at 10 o'clock or 10:30 at night. Nobody was drinking, nobody was partying. And in Uruguay, it's very easy to party. Because it's not like here, where everything closes down at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock. There were, and I'm not going to lie. I mean, I did, partake in some of these. You go to a bar or a nightclub, and the sun comes up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and everyone is still there. So the players could easily fall into that, and there is that temptation there. But they didn't do it. None of them. Even though, again, they didn't have money, they didn't have, we shouldn't equate money with professionalism, because these guys are mostly, lower middle class or poor. They all ate well. Again, they didn't drink. They were always asking me questions about nutrition and how to take care of themselves. And so I just noticed all these things that, again, you come from TFC, especially in the academy, every player there, once I had been in Uruguay and I started thinking back, to me, they just seemed like a bunch of spoiled brats in Canada, in every sense of the word. Like, I would think back to things that I saw that they didn't affect me at the time, but then I went to Uruguay, and then all of a sudden I'm thinking, holy shit. I remember seeing kids that would just take off their, their boots and their socks and all the gear, right, and just drop it in a pile. Yeah. And I'm not even talking like, there's like baskets or whatever to put your laundry. They would just drop it on the floor like a spoiled brat at their house, that they're thinking mom and dad is just going to clean up my mess for me. And they would go, again, TFC Academy, after they would shower and whatever. Now you go upstairs and there's this gourmet chef with all the food. And, it's not like these guys, they would just take the food. They wouldn't talk to the people behind the counter. Like, it was really... And even when I was in it, I guess I noticed it, but it didn't bother me. And then, a year and a half later, after I'm in Uruguay and I'm seeing how these guys are living and training, who have nothing, and they're much more professional, they're much more respectful, they don't have that sense of entitlement, and on top of everything else, they're better. That's the one thing also that I'll just say, like, on top of everything, every one of the players in the youth team, now I'm not remembering the name. What would they call their under 21 or?
It was probably Tercera.
Tercera. Okay, sorry, I was thinking Settima, but so Settima was the youngest, right? And then it goes up to third. Okay, yeah. Okay. So from that group, from that reserve to the professional, no word of a lie, every single one of those players would have been better than the players in the junior and senior TFC Academy team. Every single one. And they were more humble, and they were more respectful, and they were more professional. So
you hit it on the nail. You hit it on the nail, because I did the exact same thing as you, but reversed. I first went to Uruguay, and then I was in TFC Academy, and I showed up there, and I got signed to the USL contract, which is Tercera here. And I remember thinking, man, that was exactly my thing. And these kids are spoiled brats, but they have no idea. You know what I mean? Like, they have no clue of the difference. Like, I know exactly. That club, you were with Canadian, right? Second division, I know, because when I was with Defensor one off season, Rafa let me go and train with those guys just to keep up training. Right. And I went to that environment and I could see, and those kids, man, the dressing room was a crate. I remember it was a crate, and you go into
shipping containers that was opened up, and
that was the dressing room, But those guys, they were there 30 minutes before training, warming up on their own before the coach was even there, just to be sure that they're good. And from the moment the training started, they're like that. And like Richard said, you go to TFC, and those kids. And I remember thinking that, and you were on the other side because you're a profe, so you're with the group, but you were seeing it from a different vantage point with me as in the group. And I remember the way I would deal with it, I'd just take it out on the guys on the field. I was just extra chippy. Because I'm like, these guys are spoiled brats, they have no idea. You know what I mean? So I was extra chippy. I'd kick every new kid, you knew they were getting kicked by me. You know what I mean? Because that's how I took it out, you know? But Richard, he hit it on the nail. Yeah.
Just another thing about the chippy play, let's say, that really opened my eyes. The first time that I was in the dressing room before the very first training session, and I was just meeting all the players and everybody, and then I noticed that every single player had tensor bandages, and they're taping up their ankles, and I'm thinking, what the hell is this? Everyone's hurt already? Because we're coming from an environment where you might use wrap, or you might ask an athletic therapist to tape your ankle if you're recovering from a sprain, or, but that's it, right? And in fact, there's some good rationale behind not relying on these bandages all the time. But in any case, every single player was taping their ankles. And so eventually I asked the physiotherapist that was there, I said, are they all hurt? And he says, no, this is just, here it is in Uruguay, everybody. So they tape both ankles before every training. First of all, because, the quality of the field is not great, and, it's, maybe we can get into that about field quality, because that's another issue, but so they're kind of aware of, the safety side of it, but it's mainly because of the way they train. And so they're just expecting that they're going to get kicked, that they're going to get, into it a little bit physically, and they're preemptive. And so that was another one of those things that you're like, every single player is doing this. I just don't think, without somehow trying to replicate those aspects of that environment. This is why Canadians that go have such a hard time, and why players that are from environments like that come here, they become much better because they're, it's just harder for them over there. So,
well, it's funny you say that, because that's one of the main things that I realized too, is like, when you go there, you're obviously not there to make friends, but it's a completely different beast when you're there, and it's like, you're going there, and those guys, like you said, they're kicking you, they're doing whatever. But like, for me, that was one of the main differences. And like, when you play here, if you're that guy, like you're saying, you're going and you're crunching people, like people are kind of looking down at you and stuff. And it's like, you guys don't even understand how football is actually played on the global scale. And like, it's just so funny when you think about it now, because we're talking about TFC, which is like the top of the top here in the GTA. But now you've got kids in OPDL that I find they're not, obviously, not to sugarcoat it, they're not at that skill level of TFC. And they've got just as big, if not a bigger ego than the TFC kids.
I know.
So it's like, me playing as a center back, those are my favorite players to play against, because all it takes, it's like, okay, maybe you could be a decently good technical player, but the minute that somebody comes and crunches you, these kids are going to start complaining, and you just get in their head and they stop playing, right? So it's like, these kids now have more ego and less talent than the TFC kids, but it just, I don't know, to me it doesn't really make sense.
I'll add to that, because more or less after Uruguay was then when I started sort of working in many different Canadian professional clubs. I was with the Ottawa Fury, then eventually Halifax Wanderers, and so I saw a lot of that environment of the Canadian professional clubs. So it's not by accident that the best players in the CPL, the best players in the USL, when we still had Canadian teams there, and even in the MLS, in the Canadian side of it anyway, that the best players are foreign. Okay, because the foreign players are not only better because they've had better coaching and they're technically better, like they have that advantage, but they also have the advantage that they don't come with a sense of entitlement. And I remember seeing that really clearly many, many times, that, you can look at players in preseason, physically they're very equal, technically they're very equal, you're not quite sure who's going to become a starting player or whatever, and within a few weeks of training, it's very clear, well, okay, the guy from Mexico, like that guy is just, he's training better, he's more professional, he's willing to, to everything, to get stuck in, he's willing to push himself a bit more when he's tired. He doesn't sit in a lineup trying to talk to the athletic therapist before every practice because of pain. A lot of times they wait till they can't walk anymore before they tell you about an injury, and a lot of that is because we have this environment here where like it's like we're doing everything the opposite of the way that it should be done. I'm happy to speak more about that too, but that sense of entitlement, I don't even really blame the players because they're products of their environment. It's the coaches, the club, and all the environment that they're playing. It's their parents. It's the way they are, the way they're treated when they go to school, all of it. I think it really hurts Canadian players a lot.
And to bring it full circle, I think like the reason why that is, and I know like you said, it's not the Canadian players' fault, but the reason why that is take Uruguay as a perfect example, but it's like that in Argentina and Brazil, is most kids from the time they're born, they're born into a team, like it's their religion, like they're Catholic, Protestant, or whatever. So your family supports this team, and you're born into this team, and from the time you're 3-4 years old, you're going to the stadium, and you're seeing what real football is like. Canadian players from when they're 6, 7, soccer's first of all not a team you're born into, and number 2, if you're lucky, maybe a family once a year they'll go see Toronto FC, and that's not even what really football is. You know what I mean? So like those kids from when they're a young age, their parents are screaming louder than anyone there, and that's why it's like pushed into their DNA, so that when they get on the field, they know it's just like that's where I want to be. You know what I mean? Canadian players, we don't have that.
Yeah.
Nobody has like a thing where that's why it's so key to have a funnel system to a first team. And we don't have that here. I think that's to bring it full circle. That's why.
Yeah, and that's a good point too, because we talk a lot, and we watch a lot of your videos. We've obviously done an episode with you in the past, talking about the flaws within the Canadian system. So we talk so much about OPDL in particular because we're in Ontario. Like we could go on for days and days about how corrupt and how backwards the system is as a whole. But let's flip it now, and we can go into some of the many things that are wrong with OPDL, but let's flip it and let's talk about, if you were in charge, what are some of the things that you would do differently?
Okay, good question. So the biggest problem that I have with the OPDL and the other player development leagues in other provinces, because in fact, I kind of knew already from the work that I had done in the provincial program and the national team, but now that I've started speaking out, many people have reached out and told me there's the exact same system in Alberta. There's the exact same system in BC. All the provinces have formed these development leagues, and they're funneling players in. The biggest problem I have with it is that they're gatekeeping. And so what I mean by that is that players, if and when players do get identified into the provincial program, and the provincial program is the pathway into the youth national teams, and it is the most direct pathway even into the, let's say, the MLS academies. And so it's of course it's not the only way to become a pro, and we all know that there's many ways to do that, but that's the pathway, and they literally call it a pathway. So if a player does happen to get identified from that pathway and they're not part of the development league, they are told, sometimes they're told, hey, you have to be in the OPDL. Now I think, maybe the organizations are catching on a bit, so they'll sort of, they'll soften the way they speak about it a little, but they'll say, well, listen, the player development league is where we can guarantee that you're getting the best standards of training and all of that, and we only want to take into our provincial program those people that are getting those high standards and all that. So basically, players outside of the pathway are told, get in the pathway, or you can't be in, stay in the pathway. And then on top of that, of course, most of the identification is happening only in that pathway. So I call that gatekeeping. That's made worse by the fact that the provincial associations get a percentage of the revenue from every registration in the pathway, which means that now those provincial organizations, and I'll use my words carefully because they're all non-profits, right? Like, we all know they don't keep money left over at the end, right? But okay, so what they do is they have a financial incentive to coerce players into that system, because if the players go in that system, they get money from it.
That sounds like a doctor giving certain prescriptions to clients. That's exactly that. Yeah,
it's exactly the same thing. It is a conflict of interest. Let's just call it what it is. And obviously, there's very few people willing to call it out, because while the players in the system are scared because they're worried if they do call it out, they're going to lose opportunities. Coaches in the system are worried about losing employment and all of that. So anyway, I've quit all of that, so I don't have that fear anymore. But in any case, that conflict of interest, that gatekeeping, is the big problem that I have with it. So I would say it is great to have a pathway where players are identified and then put into provincial and national teams. That doesn't mean it's the only way that it can happen, but it's good that you have that pathway. I would argue that it should be the job of the provincial associations to employ scouts. They have to be competent, they have to be professional, they have to be experienced, hired based on merit. Okay, but those scouts, ideally, they would be, they would look everywhere. But if you want to try to kind of funnel everyone into one league or whatever, fine, you can do that. We used to have the OYSL. Well, at least then that league should be cheap. Yeah. Okay, so that means it's accessible to everyone. I think that word accessibility is very important. So if the identification happened out of a league which was inexpensive, not free, but inexpensive, then you don't have that barrier of cost, and the provincial associations should not be getting a percentage of the revenue from that league. Mm-hmm. Or, maybe the provincial associations could just take a small percentage of revenue from everything, so there was no specific financial incentive to send players to that league. So if we had that inexpensive league, and it can just simply be a league, you can still have clubs, they can still practice a few times, but don't burden, and this is the second side of it, right? Don't burden the clubs with having to pay for 3 or 4 days a week of turf fields. Mm-hmm. Don't burden the clubs with having to hire and train and pay professional coaches. It's been 10 years in Ontario. Clearly, we can see that the clubs are not capable of providing high standards of training. The fitness is an absolute farce, what they're providing in the OPDL, literally a farce in every sense of the word, okay? And they're not capable of actually providing a high standard of anything, of coaching, of opportunities, showcasing. I know we spoke a little bit about this offline, but what I would say is that the players that do play, whether it's OPDL or another development league or whatever, and then go on to play in college or university, go on to play pro or whatever, when you talk to them and their families, and I know this because I have my own business too, well, they credit Ryan and Adam with developing their technical ability. They credit me with their fitness, right, and getting them fit to play at a higher level. Whoever it is, I don't want to name all the other competitors, but it's the supplemental training programs. Yep. Who have professional coaches, who have people that know what they're doing, that are actually developing these players. So I think if you had this sort of inexpensive league where the identification was happening, well, first of all, you'd eliminate the barriers, you'd eliminate the conflict of interest, you'd eliminate the chance for corruption. And second of all, all these players that are in that league, if they have a few $1,000 to spare every year to invest in training, well, now they can invest in professionals that know what they're doing. Yeah. We can't replicate. We can't bury our heads in the sand and think that these OPDL clubs or even the TFC Academy are putting a program out there that looks anything like what a professional academy actually looks like. It's clearly not. It's clearly not good enough. Everyone that's involved in it knows that it's not good enough. That's why businesses like yours and mine and other businesses exist, to fill that gap, which is that players, even though they are in those programs and they are spending that money, they still invest extra for supplemental training because they know they're not getting the quality of training they need. They know they're not being prepared. I say eliminate the bureaucracy, eliminate the barriers, eliminate the conflict of interest. Let people be free to invest in whatever other training they want. And the other thing is, guaranteed, if you do that, you're going to end up with more of those players who are completely bypassed by the system, because we all know there's lots of them. Those now are going to get a chance that they didn't get before.
And the irony of those players who are bypassed, let's just call a spade, is most of the time you find the most talent in underprivileged places. Mm-hmm. And that's the irony. So it's like, if the whole system was centered around fueling a national team, which is player development, so that our national team can be good, then it would be along those lines. But it's not. It's what you're saying. It's so that the money pumping system where thousands and thousands of kids every year can keep making those people money, Because in a pro club, it's a one-stop shop. It's like us on one team. Yeah. We're guys on the field and one master off the field. Yeah. And that's one team you get, and you build up through that,
And the whole club is...
the whole club is that. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Well, that's a crazy thing too. I feel like back in the day, you talked about OYSL. OYSL was a lot less expensive than OPDL, and there were a lot better players coming out of it. And it's like, there's no... we're not going to sugarcoat anything here, right? Like, there's obviously a correlation between the inexpensive price and the talent that is within the league versus now you've got players paying $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, excluding travel, excluding hotels and showcases and all this nonsense. And then, you've got kids that are sitting on the sidelines and they can't play, because I say sidelines, but they're not even on the sidelines. They can't play because, it's way too expensive.
Yeah.
If you've got a single mother who's trying to provide for 3 or 4 kids, how is she going to provide for not only just one, but imagine 4 kids trying to play soccer and it's $5,000 or $6,000 each. Like it's not sustainable whatsoever.
And I would argue the worst part about it, the Player Development League and that whole pathway, it isn't even the cost. It's not the worst part about it, because if you or I or whoever wanted to, rent fields full size, have games, all that, like pay coaches and run, a program like that, there would be a cost, and there is no real other way to put that program out there without having the parents pay for it. The worst part about it, I would argue, because of the gatekeeping and the corruption, okay, nobody has the actual direct incentive to make sure that there's quality, okay? Here's the thing, it's like any other government-run system, okay? A big club, they are, again, non-for-profit. What does that mean? Well, that means, first of all, they're getting donations, they're getting government grants, they're getting access to money, regardless of what they do. Okay, they don't have to meet any real high standard to get revenue. They also get revenue from their big house league. And remember, a big house league, it's parents that have kids when they're young, and they have to put their kid in some program, so they put their kid in the program which is closest to home. So all of these, all of that revenue, all of that money that the club gets, right, they're getting that regardless of whether or not they put quality out there on the field. Now, they get their OPDL license, and they're supposed to be meeting a high standard in order to get that license, but we all know that the standards are either a complete lie, or they're so low that they have no actual credibility at all, right? So even the fact that they say they're meeting a standard is really, it's not worth anything, because it's not really true, okay? And because the provincial associations are coercing, funneling, pushing everybody in there, and everyone in the whole system knows the only way I can play for the provincial team, the only way I can get into the pathway to the youth national teams, TFC, MLS academies, all of it, is to be there. Well, those people are going to go and register and pay for those provincial development programs, whether the quality is good or not. So all of those factors, if you put those all together, and I had to ask you, does that make it more or less likely that the clubs are going to be actually incentivized to put a quality program in place?
It's obvious, it's less.
It's way less likely. So if you eliminated the corruption, well, now everyone is, for lack of a better word, they're competing and fighting for the same dollars. In your business, if you don't do a good job, if the people who hire you for coaching and development, if they're not happy, do you get any revenue at all? No, so you're directly incentivized to do a good job. So am I. We can't lie to people. We can't coerce them. We can't. I mean, you can try, but eventually people will figure it out, and they won't stay. So at least, if the identification to the provincial program was done without all the corruption, without the gatekeeping, everything, then honestly, just let the free market take care of itself. If this system of having everyone on a beautiful turf field, having all this, standards and provincial B license coaching and all of this, if this system was actually proven to, better develop talent, we would have seen some results by now, because it's been 10 years. And in fact, the results are worse than they were before.
The chart surely isn't trending upwards. No, absolutely not.
Well, I think you said it perfectly. The best way to put it is one word: results. Like the only thing that matters is results, right? Where any business really is results driven. It's a results driven business, and unfortunately, OPDL is not a results driven business. And going back to price, I mean, price is only an issue if the value is absent. So if we were to go overseas right now and we went to Chelsea and they said, okay, for your kid to play at Chelsea, it's $10,000. I guarantee you, of course, parents are going to still pay $10,000 because it's Chelsea. Yeah. And there's a proven track record of legitimate players coming through the youth system. Here, okay, TFC, it's free. You don't have to pay, thankfully, but they're not really developing players properly. And then you've got OPDL, which is the complete opposite. They're charging you thousands of dollars to not develop your kid, which is why businesses like ours and like yours have so much success. It's because there's people that see there's a huge market for this because there's no results.
And remember that TFC Academy does not have any incentive to develop players either, because they are the only professional academy in a huge city. And they are owned, their first team is owned by the wealthiest sports corporation, one of the wealthiest in the world. And that organization is fully capable of spending whatever money they want to buy, whatever players they need. So without the competition, like TFC Academy has no competition to try to recruit and identify players, and they have, no competition to try to compete for the development of those players. So they don't have any incentive either. And the way you know that they're not doing a good job of developing players is the fact that, and maybe one day I want to actually research this so I can put some numbers beside it, but I know, because I was there, and right, there are more players who are from Toronto who either never even got identified by Toronto FC, or who were in the academy and then got cut or didn't get a chance or whatever. There are more of those of that category playing professionally now than there are players that went through the academy, graduated, high school, whatever, and are playing pro. So there's no way that you can make the argument that Toronto FC or any MLS academy is doing a good job developing players if their success rate is lower than those who were there and got cut or who weren't there at all.
Yeah, I would bet the house on that. That's 100% true.
Exhibit A is you. That's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Literally.
And that's spot on true. Like, you can't deny that. Yeah, you can't deny that.
It's just everything is so backwards, but I feel like we talk about that a lot, is everything that's wrong with the system, but it's, you just gave a perfect example as to how you would properly fix it, right? I think that there's no other way to put it. You make the league way less expensive, you bring in talented players, and then obviously you got to bring in some competent coaches that know what they're doing. But
because in theory, like, it's how it should be, and it's like that in every country who's higher up on the chart in FIFA, is like, the better you get at your craft, the less you pay. That should be the formula. You know what I mean? You get more free stuff and you pay less. And every, look at, what do you call it? Defensor Nacional, all those places. You go, you start climbing the ladder, and the thing, you're from the moment you get in, like, say you come from Canadian, okay? And you're in a second division team and you're in a field, and you don't even have gear that they give you. You show up there, that's why the guys are so humble. You get the training, whatever, because they know they're coming from the fields. They work their ass off to be here. You know what I mean? You worked your butt off just to get in the door. You know what I mean?
That's, it's so true. One of the fields when I was in Argentina, they called it the grass field. I kid you not. It was literally, there was maybe 2 or 3 patches of grass on it. It was all dirt. And you pass a ball and it's bouncing like this. And after like a week, 2 weeks, I'm like, it clicked. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. That's why these guys are so good.
Exactly.
If you're able to play on a field like that they call a grass field, there's no grass.
It's one of my big pet peeves when I hear all of these coaches and players and all. I call them like soccer snobs. It's like they complain so much about the quality of the fields, and they start almost making this point. Like it's so bizarre, because it just shows how ignorant they are of what actual professional soccer is. Because they think they see Barcelona, they take a trip to Manchester United and they see these amazing fields, and they don't realize that that's the 0.000 to infinity percent, and they don't realize that the quality of the field, first of all, it doesn't help at all to have players playing on these pristine, beautiful pitches and all that, because as you mentioned, often what happens is that you're competing against other people that came up in these environments where the fields were not like that and all that. Okay, maybe you could make the argument a little bit about injury prevention and all that, but you adapt to your surroundings in the end, and so it's such a backwards way of thinking that, like, wow, if we're going to develop players, we have to put them on a beautiful field all the time. Where's the evidence of that? Where is the evidence that young kids develop into better soccer players by playing on perfectly flat, clean, symmetrical pitches all the time? Everywhere else you go, and again, we can use Uruguay as a perfect example. Where are those kids playing before they get identified to the professional club? First of all, as I said, they're on the street, in the backyard, wherever they can, in the basement of their houses or whatever. And even where they're actually playing with their team, they're in baby football. Yeah. You remember that, right? Like, yeah. So baby football is like, take the worst house league you can see here in Canada. That's kind of like what baby football looks like. The parents are yelling and screaming, threatening the referee. All the fields again are whatever they are. They're not, they're not well maintained. They're not, no thought is really put into standardizing things. There's different age groups together. There's all of it. Like it's organized to the sense that it functions, but it's just a cheap, efficient way to get as many kids playing as possible. Again, all of the professional scouts go and watch the baby football games so they can help to identify players. But are those players developing in baby football? Or are they developing by doing all the other things that they're doing on their own? What's developing them?
Exactly, it's that. It's the time they're spending alone. And then that's why, and then you get into the pro club and it's all kids who come from that environment and now they're all playing on a good field. So the levels just, it's way jump,
You earn it.
Yeah, you earn it. That's
100%.
what I mean. That's what I mean.
It's honestly here, it's I hate to say it, but it's ignorance, especially from parents. It's ignorance because how many times have parents come up to you and they're like, oh, we want our child to be training more at home. Like we bought them this rebounder and this and that. And, we look at each other and we're like, there's a wall right there.
Yeah,
What do you
exactly.
need this big rebounder, $600 rebounder for? Like, just grab a ball, grab a wall. Like, that's it. It's simplified. It's very simple. And there's a reason why soccer is a global game. It's the least expensive. It should be the least expensive game around. But for some reason, one way or another, Canada seems to think that it needs to be like hockey and it needs to be thousands of dollars every single year. Like, I don't know.
I think it's just an epidemic of not good quality coaches. And I give this example all the time, Richard, and I've given it in other episodes, but I'll tell it to you again. It's like before UFC was around, how many McDojos there were, you called them, of guys who would put on their purple or black belt and they'd say this works, that doesn't work. And then UFC came around and it's clear as day that that's a joke and this isn't. And you see, right? And that's what's going on in Canada with soccer is every Joe Bloke can put on a pair of shoes and UEFA B license and you kick him the ball and the ball goes 20 feet off his feet. You know what I mean? It's just like it's an epidemic of it. And that's why it's like, it's not the kid's fault. You know what I mean? I get it. It's the environment they're in. But if it starts at the top with the people saying, all right, let's not do this fully about money anymore. Let's really try and make a difference for our national teams. And also the TFC, I think if they were smart, what they would do is they would start developing players with the aim of shipping them off. That's where they would be smart. Because not everyone's going to go to their first team, and basically their first team, their academy model isn't really to fuel their first team that much. They buy a lot of players. They've strayed from it since I've been there. They started buying less from what I see. But their model isn't really to develop. So, okay, that's fine. You don't want your guys to go to the first team. You want to keep buying players. Well, develop them to ship them off. Yeah. And you'll get a real name for yourself,
Let me ask you though, like, if that were the objective of, TFC Academy, if that were the objective of these, high performance pathway systems or whatever, what percentage of the coaches that are in those environments now, I don't want to name names and whatever, but what percentage of those coaches that are in those environments now, do you think are actually capable of doing that? And do you think we're hired based on, the perception and the assumption that they would be, the best possible candidate, the best people, the most qualified people to do that? What percentage?
They'd be clean. It would be a clean house.
It's almost
clean house.
Okay, because and that's a good friend of ours that I can mention. His name is Rafael Carbajal. I mean, he's one of the ones that kind of opened my eyes to all this stuff because I worked with him a long time ago, and he kind of started making these points to me. Is that the all of the top organizations in soccer here, you can go national team and the youth national teams, you can go the Toronto FC Academy and the other MLS academies, you can go down the list. Very few of them have actually gone out and hired experts. TFC in Toronto, we said it, right? TFC is like Barcelona in Toronto. They're the highest level club that competes in the highest level league, and they're drawing from Ontario, which is the biggest province. And so that means that, the U14 academy coach, the U16 academy coach, the fitness coach, all those people, they should be like literally the best U17, or they should be the best coach in that category in the whole country. That's who should be there. because there isn't a more high status and more influential job for a top coach to have. Did they go and hire those people?
I doubt. I mean, I don't. But I would bet that they didn't. Yeah.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Most of the coaches that you can look at their background and their resume at the point that they were hired. Most of them only had experience in amateur clubs here in Ontario, and maybe one or two in university. None of them were brought in with any professional experience. None of them were brought in with any national team or international experience. None. And so we don't have anywhere near the level of expertise even in these so-called high-performance programs. So yeah, it would be great if TFC took the mentality that, no, okay, our first team is going to spend, $10 million and buy whoever. That's fine. We're going to develop. We're going to ship them off. Yeah. They can't. They don't have the coaches. They don't have the quality. Yeah. And they keep hiring more young, inexperienced, unqualified people.
And that's what's so funny, but they have the $25 million facility. You know what I mean? I know, yeah. So it's just like, it should be the easiest thing in the world to do that. You know what I mean?
So then why is it that when coaches, and we'll say Rafa, for example, because Rafa is one of the best coaches that has been around here, why is it that when a coach like that comes in here, they don't stay?
Because they know how much of a joke is and their patience wears thin.
He was not able to work within that system, because to work within that system, you either have to be incompetent, or you have to keep your mouth shut and not call things out. And he's a competent, experienced coach, and obviously he has his. He doesn't keep his mouth shut either, right? But I went through the same thing. Like it's you start to see it. I mean, I'll give just one example, okay, of which happened, before I had my little falling out with Ontario Soccer, which is I had meetings with the, at the time, manager of coach education. Never coached before, but that's his job. Director of development, barely ever coached before, and so all these higher up people, and we were talking about implementing some more standards for the fitness side of the player pathway. Okay, and in this conversation, I just said, look, we have to start by standardizing the testing. Because I know you guys are saying that everyone has to do a speed test and a beep test or whatever, but come out there and see what's happening. I've been there. At that time, I was still working with 5 or 6 clubs. Nothing that we're doing right now is standardized. You have some clubs that are doing their test outdoor. Some are doing it indoor. They're using different equipment. Many of the so-called fitness coaches or experts that are running the tests have literally no idea what they're doing. You got players calling themselves out during beep tests, and so it's not standardized. Therefore, the data that's coming out of those tests is not reliable. And I said this to them, and then I said, and then on top of that, it's been already, because this was like 2019, right? It's already been however many years, 5-6 years of this OPDL. Who's looking at this data? Are you doing anything with it? Right? And so this is something, and I was there. I was working in the provincial program. I was a coach educator. It's not like I was some outsider that was, calling them all out. But when you start to say those things and when you start to question it, well, now all of a sudden in their head, and remember, the leadership are incompetent. So now they see someone that's calling things out and whatever. The answers I got was always just, well, Richard, we can't afford to run a standardized testing combine. We can't get everyone else on the same page. The clubs won't cooperate. It was all these, they make excuses, so they don't do what I suggest. And then again, they won't say this, but the fact that I'm suggesting it, okay, the fact that I'm calling out these things which are clear problems. Well, that rubs them the wrong way. Yeah. And so, listen, when the time comes and they have the opportunity and the power to cut out those competent people that have those good ideas, they cut them out. Yeah. So why don't they succeed? Because when you have incompetent people at the top, the only possible people that can work underneath incompetent people are other incompetent people.
Could not agree more.
You can't change that.
Yeah, and that's it sounds like just you went in there and you were probably one of the only few that was there, and it's let's actually make a difference here. But they're in their head, they're like, his real answer would have been, I don't care about the data. We're doing that so that we can charge $3,000 more.
Yeah. Obviously, I knew. It's not said, but that's the obvious reason. Yeah. So that answers the question. Why was it Rafael Carvajal or any other of the competent people that have come through the system? You know, the only way that it would change would be if we had competent leadership, and then that leadership cannot be corrupted. Like, they can't have a financial incentive to keep going with this program that's not working.
Do you think it's too easy, too hard, or, you know, do you think it's just right the way that they give out these coaching licenses?
In Canada?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the problem is that in Canada, and okay, now they're calling it CONCACAF, so somehow, you know, that makes it more prestigious, because we all know that CONCACAF has been such an amazing track record of developing coaches, right? All these, you know, Central American and Caribbean nations, and, you know, it's like, okay, whatever they want to call it, okay, they can, you know, you can put lipstick on a pig, right? It's still a pig, right? Okay. The quality of the value of the coach license that you have is only worth the quality and the knowledge and the experience and the competence of the instructor. Okay? And so again, I go to the same question that I had about the, you know, the coaches in the high performance programs and the development programs and all that. The instructors in the coach licenses here in Canada, many of them have almost no coaching experience at all, and none of them have high level coaching experience. None of them are coming in having coached national teams, professional clubs, anything internationally. When I was a coach developer at Canada Soccer and Ontario Soccer, the years that I was there, I was the only one. And remember, I taught C license and my fitness course and the introduction, you know, the learn to train, all that. Like that's all I taught. I didn't even, you know, at the B license, all I did was the physical part of it, because I wasn't experienced enough, so-called, right? I was the only one in the entire staff that had actually worked in a national team and in professional soccer. The only one. They don't bring competent instructors, and so the value of the license, to me, it's worth nothing. Mm-hmm. It's worth nothing. Here's another way that you can try to determine it. Take my opinion, take my own experience out of it. How many of the coaches that have achieved this Canadian National B, CONCACAF B, whatever these licenses, how many of them do you think would be capable of, let's say, going to Uruguay, let's say going outside of Canada and working in any high-performance professional national team? How many of them?
Zero. And it's not due to language barrier.
Oh.
You know what I mean? Like,
no. People speak English these days. It's not, no. Yeah, no. Yeah, no. I mean based on their competence, based on the quality, right. So it's not worth the paper that it's printed on. And remember, because of, you know, the increased revenue, because of all these programs, the fee for these C licenses and B licenses, I've checked, right? And people have reached out to me and told me, in the last 6-7 years, the price has doubled. You have to pay like something like $1,600 now to get a C license that's taught by, again, I mean, the director of development at Ontario Soccer has almost no coaching experience at all. And this guy is like the top guy that teaches the courses and develops the curriculum. Imagine as a coach, imagine, like, you know, we have people coming here, immigrants from all over the world, coaches, people that have played pro, that have coached in pro environments. Imagine you come here, you're a professional coach, $1,600 price tag, and you get Matt Ferreira as your instructor. I mean, imagine that. Imagine you get someone that's like never even coached before and is just reading off of a manual that was, you know, developed by some other guy that never coached before. It's like...
Yeah, you know, the perfect example of it is yoga. You know how there's a huge epidemic with yoga now, and every yoga studio has this type of yoga in that studio, and you get a certification and you can teach yoga. I was listening to this one guy, and he's like he was like a yogi living in the Himalayas. So he was proper practicing yoga. And he was saying that, like, you know, what's funny is, like, I was going to ask he was joking with the guy on the podcast. He said, I was going to ask my master for a certification, but I know if I said that to him, he'd slice my tongue off. You know what I mean? It's just like the people who really know it, just like with yoga, that guy, you think a certification to be a yoga teacher? It's like, no. Yoga it has nothing to do with any certification, you know, and it's the same with this, you know? The people who know it are the people, like, who do you want to learn from? You want to climb Mount Everest. You want to learn from the guy who's an absolute master and he knows everything in the booklet about it, and he can go through on page 25 that, like, at this part of the mountain you're going to experience this, but he never carved his feet in the mountain. Yeah. You know what I mean? Who do you want to learn from? You want to learn from the guy who doesn't have anything to do with that, but he climbed it 6-7 times. Yeah. You know, it's
Alex Honnold.
Yeah, you know.
It's insane.
Yeah,
we could go on for days about that.
Yeah,
honestly.
that's
There's so many things you could go on about. But We'll kind of transition a little bit. We'll talk more about the sports science and, soccer in particular. Obviously, there's a lot of common injuries, but what are some of the most common that you've seen in some of the preventative measures that young players could incorporate?
Okay, so first of all, before we get into any specifics about injuries, the one thing that any player or any athlete can do to try to minimize the risk of injury, because you can't prevent things, but is they have to start understanding training load. And then they have to start understanding what we call periodization. Periodization is basically where you make small incremental increases in load relative to your capacity. And so the main reason that athletes get hurt, especially kids get hurt, is not because they're doing too much, but because they're doing too much too soon, which means that the jumps or the increases that they make in load are too high, too much all at once kind of thing, right? And the common way that this looks in soccer will be maybe you are in, whatever league or club or whatever you're in, and then, you go from that to maybe a national team camp if you're good, right? And that national team camp now is, it's every day. The training is much more intense than you're used to, whatever. Or, you're in high school, you're playing in your OPDL or whatever club you are 3-4 days a week, the intensity is not so high. Then you go to college or university and it's every day or twice a day. Or so it's those jumps that that are too much too soon. So the way to prepare yourself for those, again, you have to understand training load and currently how hard you're working and what your current fitness level is. And then, without going into all the details, basically about every 3 weeks or every month, the training load it needs to increase. And ideally it needs to increase, by about 5, 10, 15%. And so what happens is over time, if you do that, if you make those increases every 3 weeks to a month, you build yourself up to the capacity that you can handle the higher level of training load, which you're going to get when you go pro or when you go, into a national team or whatever, college, whatever those higher levels are. And so that sort of minimizes the risk of injury. That's the first thing to do. Build your capacity. Everybody here in Ontario and in Canada is being told, and this again is because the people that are instructing the courses and all of that are all incompetent. We're telling everyone that they're overtraining, that they're doing too much, and we tell them, and then we give them all these weird, bizarre rules like no more than 3 practices a week, because somehow, if you go to 4, well, that's the magic number that's going to, make you tear your ACL. Don't do school soccer because, then they can't control how much you're training, how much you're playing. So we're kind of discouraging extra exercise and extra load, and we're telling people that we're doing that in order to reduce their risk of injury. But what happens when you do that is the kids train less, they exercise less, their capacity goes down, their risk of injury goes up. So we need to, fix that. We need to get people thinking about exercising and training every day, but making small incremental increases. After that, okay, some specific things. I think, in our sport, the ligaments in the knee, take a bit of a beating. There's a lot of changes of direction. There's a lot of, stops and starts and landing from jumps and all that. So I'm talking, the anterior cruciate ligament, okay, that's the main one. And then you have the other, cruciate ligaments in the knee. You prevent injuries to the knee by strengthening all of the muscles around the knee, specifically the hamstrings. There's the external rotators, the ones that rotate the hip outward, and then the glutes and the quads and the low back. There's specific types of prevention exercises, so you don't just need them to be strong, but you need to do plyometrics is the word, but where you're training landing and kind of landing, and you don't really absorb forces, you actually produce a force called an eccentric force. So you make your landings nice and explosive, and then put them back up again, and also training for landings where you just sort of land and stick and control the landing. So those types of exercises are really good in terms of preventing knee injuries.
Unilateral stuff is huge too, right?
That's a big one, and in fact, whether it's knee, ankle, whatever we're going to talk about, unilateral, meaning training one leg at a time, is very important. I think we talked even offline about this, about everybody in our sport has a plant leg and a kicking leg, and even if you're double-footed, you have one that's a little more common. So the planting leg tends to be stronger, more stable, less flexible. So if you're going to hurt, hamstring, that kind of thing, it might be more on the plant leg. Eventually, maybe even the Achilles tendon, that kind of thing. The kicking leg, on the other hand, is weaker, okay, more flexible, because that's the one that's swinging. And so the key is, at least with training, with strength training, with those exercises where you're under control, train them both equally, right, unilaterally. Train with both feet as much as you can, because as I said, everyone has the dominant leg, but you can at least make the difference in dominance less. So it might be, you know, 55-45 rather than, you know, 70-30 kind of thing, unilateral. Maybe I would speak also just about, you know, because we can talk ankles, hips, groin, those are other areas that are injured a lot in our sport. I think regular customized mobility exercises, customized to each individual based on whatever that person has. Because some people tend to get problems, let's say, in their lower back. Others tend to get problems in, you know, whatever, in the shins, in the knee, whatever it is. So a customized routine of stretches and mobility exercises that are done every day. This is what, you know, a lot of our work, you know, we do this, and especially when we're working with pros, with guys that are older, like a fitness coach or a sports scientist, by the time, like if you're in the pro game and you're working with anyone that's older than about 22, you're not building fitness anymore at that point. You're keeping them healthy. Yeah. And so you will be judged in terms of the quality of your work. You will be judged based on how many games, you know, the starting 11 or the best players are able to play healthy. So yeah, so it's a long story short kind of thing, but that's my answer there. Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember you were telling me about some of the exercises they were giving you in Uruguay, and it was stuff that you hadn't seen prior to going there.
Yeah.
And some of it's, you know, the plyometrics and the single leg stuff where you're on your back and then you got a weight in your hand and you go up, and it's like a pistol squat basically. Like it's just I don't know, stuff around here you obviously don't see that.
But you could feel it when you're doing it. It's just like you can tell that this stuff has been battle tested for like generations. You know what I mean? You could feel it when you're doing it. It's like, that's why all these kids are animals, you know? But it's because it worked for how many other kids before that, you know? It's like, the luxury of being in a good club.
Yeah, one thing that they would do too, and I didn't, I obviously had never experienced this prior to going there, but one thing that they were doing, some days was before training, other days were after training, but they would do, I think they call it contrast training, where it was like, obviously all your compound lifts, so like your squats, your deadlifts, all that kind of stuff, but they would do very low reps and very high weight, and then once you would finish that, so let's say you're doing, you know, 200 pounds on the squat rack, you're doing 200 for 3, but nice and explosive. As soon as you finish the squats, you're going into broad jumps, or you're going into sprints or something like that, so you're trying to use the explosiveness from the weights into sprinting or jumping.
There's a term for that. It's called post-activation potentiation. So it's, you know, big words or whatever, but basically post-activation means after activation. And so the idea is that the heavy lift activates, in order to lift something heavy, I mean, and it's relative to your capacity, but you know, if you get into the 200 pounds, that's heavy, right? So in order to lift that, you have to recruit more motor units. So that motor units are, you know, when you have a motor neuron, which originates on the brain spinal cord, and it innervates a certain number of muscle fibers. And so if you have to lift something heavy, you need to get as many, you know, muscle fibers or muscle cells recruited as possible. So you recruit more motor units, meaning you activate. And so now, you know, the muscles in the legs, the glutes, all that are activated after the heavy lift. So in fact, because this is called post-activation potentiation. So potentiation, you can think of that as an increase in power. So the muscles get potentiated after they're activated. So if you lift heavy and then you do a jump or a sprint or something more explosive, you will perform that jump or that sprint better because the muscles are potentiated. And they're potentiated because it's right after activation. So it's used to get a better output from the training. So imagine if, you know, in your training you can only do 10 sprints, or, you know, there's a certain number, you can't do it forever. If each sprint is done after a heavy lift and each sprint is that much faster, that much more explosive, and you do that for 6 weeks or 8 weeks, then the eventual outcome is, you know, the muscles have received a stimulus that's a bit higher. They're going to get a bit stronger. They're going to get a bit faster. So that's it's another good strategy. It's more about performance than about injury prevention.
The knowledge Richard had is just like, it's putting it all together. Like, I couldn't imagine the absolute animals that would be created if kids came, they trained with us on the field and they did off work stuff with him. It would be ridiculous because like that's how it is in pro clubs. They have absolute guys who know what it is on the field, and then they have the pro face who are the wizards off the field. You know what I mean?
That's why I tell all the clients that they come to me and they say, oh, where can I go for sprint training or for aerobic fitness and all that kind of stuff? I say, Richard. Like, I want to link the video because I remember you guys took a video when I was there and I got up on the treadmill, I think to like 20.5 miles an hour. Like
20 miles per hour.
I remember there was a coach when I was growing up that told me, basically you have a sprint ceiling and you can't pass that threshold or something. And I remember thinking like, oh, maybe that's true, maybe that's not. And then I go to Richard and like, I've never been not only fit, but I've never been that quick in my life. Like it's just, you call it the 20 mile an hour club, but like it was the treadmill's going and you're in the harness and you've got somebody pushing, basically just holding you upright, making sure your technique is good. But you're never going to experience that going to LA Fitness on one of those treadmills or anything like that. Like you need to dedicate and invest in yourself by going to the people who know what they're doing.
Yeah. And that's the only way to get to a place where you have it all a one-stop shop. Is you have to go multiple guys and you have to grind, and then all of a sudden you have the luxury of a one-stop shop in a pro club.
But I just think that it's around here especially, it's just people think that they know it all.
Yeah, that's the biggest
They think
problem.
that I see Richard, that's good. Maybe it's a little too far. Maybe it's a little more expensive. I could do it at home. And it's like, okay, anybody can break out 3 or 4 hurdles and jump over the hurdles and sprint. But I mean, if you want serious results, you're going to go to somebody like Richard who has been doing it forever. He has the research to back it up, but most importantly, he has the results.
That's,
I literally, I'm going to put the video. I'll tell Marcus to put it in. But like, I went from being a relatively quick player to in the span of 6 months, and I was only going there once a week. But Richard gave me a program to do at home. Imagine you're going there 3-4 times a week. Oh my God.
But what you said about people put on that they know is the biggest thing, because that's the ego. You know what I mean? And it's just like the perfect example is like you can take it in anything. But I play a lot of chess. And when you first start playing chess and you just start getting in, you think, and you're beating people, you think, well, I'm a superstar. You know what I mean? But it takes getting to a certain level to realize that how much little knowledge you have. You know, and it's like that with anything. The more you learn and you have the luxury of learning, the more you realize how little you know. It's when you know very little that you think you know a lot.
That's the Dunning-Kruger effect. That's the the people who have very, very minimal knowledge, but they are the ones that seem to try to project this, that they have all the answers. And in fact, it's usually people that suffer from the Dunning-Kruger effect that end up becoming leaders in corrupt organizations. Because if you do suffer from that problem, and again, that's our leadership in our provincial and national associations, you have an easy answer for everything. So you tell people what they want to hear. You act and you behave in a way as though you have all the answers. You can solve every problem, and there's a simple solution to every problem and all that. Whereas if you do have a little more knowledge, you're naturally more skeptical. You're naturally aware of the fact that, well, solving problems is hard, whether it's fitness or training or development or whatever, it's not there isn't no one-size-fits-all cure.
And you're way more receptive and open,
And but then that makes it less likely that an incompetent organization is going to want to hire you. So that's then you got to read Machiavelli. The Prince, we've been aware of this for almost 1,000 years, but it still hasn't changed. So.
History does tend to repeat itself, doesn't it?
Because I can speak if you want. We can speak about it more. But like what you're talking about, like the treadmill, it's used for overspeed, and so the idea is that, first of all, because you're on a treadmill, and it's very difficult to get yourself to run at a certain speed anyway. Second of all, there's the safety harness, so you do feel safe, and you don't feel like you're going to fall. And then there's the fact that the harness also does unweighting, so you feel lighter basically, and that it's unweighted only by about 10 pounds, but that's enough, right? I mean, you don't even weigh 200 pounds, so 5% of your body weight or more. And so you feel lighter, and so for all those reasons, you can reach a speed on the treadmill that is way faster. Like that was one of my studies. Like we found we can get people up to 30% faster. So think of it this way: Usain Bolt on the ground runs 22 miles an hour. So, even if you're fast, I mean, you're not that fast, right? So if you're in the treadmill and you're running, those speeds, that's faster than you can run on the ground. And, for that reason, you've now felt what it feels like to run that fast.
So how much of that is mental though?
It's hard to say.
Like that can't be placebo. There's obviously results for it.
So the idea is that the fact that you're able to do it, now you, for lack of a better term, you know what it feels like.
Yeah.
And if you know what it feels like, now you can draw upon that when you have to. So it's not so much mental as it is neuromuscular. So if you're looking at measuring the improvement, you didn't get faster because your muscles got stronger. You got faster because the connection between the brain and the muscles sped up.
I think the most valuable thing that I learned was the proper technique and how to run. I'm pretty sure you came to watch one of the sessions, but it's like you're on the treadmill, and then when you get off the treadmill, you rest and you're watching yourself run, and then you do push-ups or whatever one of the exercises is, and then you're sitting on the ground, feet in front of you, and you're just focusing on pumping the arms like this. And it's like stuff that you would never learn if you're going to Joe Schmo on the side of the road. That's I'm a fitness coach and I'm a speed specialist and all that kind of stuff. Richard literally broke down exactly what we're doing. So you have the two axes on the screen, I remember. So torso upright, your knees have to be driving and have to be hitting 90 degrees. Everything is broken down perfectly, and it's like, holy shit. And then you can actually watch yourself do it.
And we filmed it. Yeah, that was the thing, because that's one of the reasons why I like using treadmills, because I had a bit of a track and field background too, and in, obviously in track and field, so much of the training is on technique, and so if a good coach can help you with that, but it's not efficient. It's like the coach has to run with you to or you can put a camera, but you're kind of filming someone as so this using it on a treadmill, basically the athlete is there. You can film them from the side, you can film them from the back, you would remember, and then we just put the video on a tape delay. So you do a little interval run or whatever, and while you're resting, now you can see yourself, and we, then we had like a software program that, we can zoom in on your feet, we can measure the angle of the, the hip as it flexes, and so we could kind of teach all those technical things, and then on top of that, as I said, you have the neuromuscular benefit, which is, again, for lack of a better word, once you feel what it feels like to move quicker, the legs are being forced to move quicker, eventually you can develop the ability to do that. So. Yeah, that's why you got faster.
No, but I think honestly, one of the main things too is that people that go in there, and I'm sure you can go into detail more about it, but the people that go in there know that they're not in there to mess around. Every single, it was an anomaly if I went in there and either myself or any of the other people in there weren't throwing up.
Bucket, yeah.
There's literally a puke bucket right beside, because it's like we're not messing around here.
You're the master of that, and I think you'll know better than anyone the load and how much they should do. But how important do you think it is? Because for me, I think it's so important for kids, regardless of recovery and what it might do to your body when you're young, to push yourself to that point. It's so important because of the dividends it pays mentally. You know what I mean? Regardless what it might do on your body in the short term, this and that, what that does for your mind is so important.
I would say, again, the same way that we've been telling kids that, they're training too much and, they're overtraining, all that, even within practices and all that, I don't know, I almost feel like it's an ideology which has kind of infected public school, parenting, sports. Obviously, everything is now about making athletes feel good about themselves and also avoiding anything that makes them uncomfortable. So, and that means the way you talk to them, the way you coach them, and even, physically how hard you push them and all that. And I mean, obviously there's a limit to what people can do. There's a limit to what the body can handle and all that. No, right, yeah, but okay, yeah, and I'm, I feel very similar to that, which is, okay, there's an upper limit or whatever, but, we are nowhere near that with training. Yeah. And as I said, the moment that training starts to become uncomfortable, essentially, again, because of this sort of ideology and the way that we are with the way we treat kids and young athletes, the moment that the training becomes uncomfortable, we stop. Yeah. And in fact, we don't even feel a lot of times like we're supposed to even push them to be uncomfortable in the first place. And so let's just, because there's a mental side of it, which I'll speak about, but even before that, let's just talk about the physical side. The only way that any physiological system adapts or improves is from overload. Overload literally means that you are doing something in your workout which is harder or overloads your system, harder than you're currently capable of doing or than you currently have been doing. How does it feel when you overload? Well, if it's lifting weights or whatever, it feels very uncomfortable. It feels painful. There's going to be a lot of lactic acid in the muscles. Essentially, your self-protective mechanism in your body is going to tell you that to stop. And you have to override that and you have to push through it, because if you don't get overload, okay? With weight training and all that, it's usually the last couple of repetitions that make the difference. That's okay. Now with running, how does that feel? For lack of a better word, it feels like you're going to throw up. Okay? And eventually, again, there's almost this thing, and you were a professional, right? I mean, you feel like you're going to throw up. You might even, you start to doubt yourself. You're like, I don't know if I can keep going, right? Like, and that happens. And so if that's the moment where you stop, now you have not overloaded. You haven't overloaded the cardiovascular system. You may maintain your fitness that way, but you won't improve. So overload is the only way that you improve, and getting athletes to overload is essential, because without that, they'll never improve, and what will happen eventually is their fitness will go down physically. Then there's the mental side of it, which is, I kind of like how you put it, Adam, because you said, at some point, it almost doesn't matter how your body feels or whatever, there's something that you get out of going through it. And okay, this is hard to quantify. Yeah. I have some ideas about, looking at, I've done this with beep tests and yo-yo tests and stuff, where you can kind of look at the moment that an athlete gets to their maximum heart rate, which happens in a beep test, right? Sometimes they stop, soon after that. Sometimes they don't. The truth is, a well-trained soccer player or other athlete can be at their maximal heart rate for a certain amount of time. Could be even for several minutes, 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes even. So my idea is sort of to look at, rather than just fitness or performance, look at how long did everybody stay at their maximal heart rate? How long did they access? And there's an anaerobic reserve. There's all these ways to measure it or whatever. But the simple way to put it is, how long can you stay at your maximal heart rate before you quit? Yes. And there's a physical benefit to it. At some point, you maybe go past the physical benefit. Maybe it starts to become bad for you physically, right? You're overdoing it a bit. Yeah. But what about the mental side of it? What about the fact that in games? Funny, I mean, I have a paper which I'm hoping is going to get published very soon, where we're talking specifically about this, about that there is what we call, when we look at GPS and heart rate and whatever in a game, there's something called peak period. And so rather than looking at the total amount of sprinting or fast running or average heart rate or whatever, you look at small windows of time in a game, 1 minute at a time or 3 minutes at a time, and you find those small, like a little block of 3 minutes or whatever, in which the heart rate, the running, the acceleration, the tackles, all those things are highest, are at their peak. And those are the moments, first of all, those are the moments that decide the outcome of games. Because those are the moments where you're already very tired, you feel like you're going to throw up, you don't feel like you can keep going, but you have to. Because if you don't, you miss out on a chance to score a goal, you miss out on a chance to stop a goal, basically. Those are the moments that decide the games. That's one. And two, those are the moments you have to train for. Because if you don't train at that intensity, and the first time or the only time you experience that intensity is in the game, you are not prepared for it.
Yeah.
So, and then you're not even taking into consideration the thousands of people that are watching.
All the other things that can affect fatigue and
That's where I was going with the mental side of it too, is like above where you're redlining and you're past the point of like, I might not even get any more fit, what that inner dialogue does to you when it's really time. And then there's lots of people watching and you're redlining, but you're saying, no, I'm not done. I'm not done. I'm not done. And the red line's going like this. Because then when you're in the game and maybe you're extra tired or whatever, maybe it's not even fatigue, it's whatever. You messed up something or whatever. You did something wrong. That inner dialogue, because you push yourself to that limit, I feel like your dialogue becomes much better.
100%. 100%.
Due to it.
That's why every Saturday morning before I left, I was going to Richard. And every morning, I get there like 15, 20 minutes early. I sit in the car for like 5 minutes. Mentally preparing. I'm like, Pardon my language. This is gonna suck.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so I get in there, I see all the, Richard and everybody, all the employees in there smiling, and I'm like, let's get to work. But like, there was never a time where I left the facility and I was like, oh, I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
Because it's a mental hurdle.
Yeah.
And I want people to, to feel that way because again, the training has to be hard, or else there's no point doing it. There's no, there's a value to doing, long runs and recovery runs. You don't need me for that. But, that's fine. The low intensity stuff, you can do that on your own. But obviously we're using treadmills and we're using some technology that, for lack of a better word, it forces you to run fast. You could do similar things on your own if you really push yourself. But
you can't fake it though,
Yeah.
right? Like because that's what I'm going to talk about with the GPS, because there's times obviously when you're training on your own, you're holding yourself accountable, but like you're talking about the inner voice, you're like, oh, this is my max, but then you go to Richard and you've got sensors on you, you've got heart monitors on you, and you're like, Richard, I can't push anymore. He's like,
Yeah.
you're only at 70%.
Keep your ass on that treadmill.
Yeah, you're not getting off. The hamster runs were the worst. He puts it on an incline, and the belt is off. So you're holding it, and it's just your legs, and you're the one moving the treadmill. And those things, like to this day, I think of it and I want to throw up. It's the worst run ever, but it's like there's nothing like it.
And it does a lot. So literally, it's called tolerance training, and it's designed to increase your ability to tolerate a high amount of lactic acid. And if you try to sustain a sprint, maybe you guys might have heard the word speed endurance. That's another term for it. But you try to sustain a sprint for longer than about 10 to 15 seconds. Like more or less after 10 seconds, whatever creatine you had in your muscles is gone, and if you try to keep going, now you're starting to use glucose for energy. You're starting to produce lactic acid. And after 15 seconds, it might not be that high, but after 20, or we used to do runs that were even over 30 seconds. By that point, it's very high, and so over time, what happens is you develop the ability to tolerate it. And maybe that's a good way to think about it, is being able to tolerate the discomfort. And again, I think that as I said, I can give specific examples, like, a lot of the coaching courses, coaches will come in there and there'll be some psychologist or something, right? That isn't an elite athlete, that maybe has some experience with athletes, but is coming at it from this standpoint of not wanting anyone to feel uncomfortable at all. And then they'll start talking about safe sport, and how basically
Those are the same people who are saying pulling a shirt is in the game is unsportsmanlike or whatever.
It's it's all about this thing of not just fairness, but it's like this weird empathy, to the point where the empathy that you have for other people, like, it hurts you, because they take advantage of you, and it hurts them because they never improve. And I don't know, again, I can almost trace it back, like it started outside of sport and it's now, come into our sport. But we have to educate coaches and fitness coaches and all that about training load and periodization and how to do things properly. And in fact, when you learn about those things, you would never bother, you'd never be worried about a coach pushing an athlete or all of those things. You would encourage that, because you'd know, okay, they know how much is too much, they know when not to take it too far, but they also know how to achieve overload, how to build fitness, all those things. And we're going very far away from that. But I think that the mental side of it is a significant factor. And
because for the pros, that's what pays off way more. You know what I mean? And when the bright lights are on, it's the mental that pays off way more. And that's why I think people are so attracted to guys like David Goggins. And I know he's the absolute extreme, but his whole thing is just like, when you're at that point when you're going to puke and you're at your absolute limit, by his calculations, and from it, you're at 30%.
Yeah.
That's how he sees it,
wild.
But that's from him. He's pushed his body so hard. He's learned. It's just like, when get that, no, I've got a ton more,
Well, I have a funny story, and it was obviously after going to Richard, I was like getting ready to go. It was one of the times I didn't like during the week, so I would go to Richard on Saturdays, So he gave me a program to do during the week, and I try to work out early in the morning. So I'm there at my LA Fitness early in the morning, and I do the runs that you gave me. And I think I had like 6 or 8 runs or something to do, and I finished the last one, and I'm like, man, I feel good. I'm like, let's do it again. Yeah. I do one more, I get off. I'm like, oh, I don't feel so good. I go to the bucket, start yakking, and I felt so bad. I didn't realize till after. There's a woman sitting on the stationary bike right next to the garbage. So I finished, turned to her, I'm like, I'm so sorry. She's like, no worries.
You can do those high intensity interval runs in front of other people, man. You got to do them by yourself. Yeah, get a treadmill in your basement. No.
Well, she was looking at me like I was nuts, and I'm like, hey, it was. But honestly, like that's one of the things where I did all of those runs and all the preparation, and then I went down to South America and I scored the highest on the fitness test.
Yeah.
Because it's like when you put in that work when nobody's watching, and when you have experts who are leading you and showing you exactly how to do it and how to properly push yourself, once you get to the environment that you want to be in, it's
that's the secret recipe.
It's the old saying, like, if your training is hard, then the games are easy, and if the training is easy, then the games are hard. That's how it is.
Yeah.
But going back to that, and we'll end it off on this because we've taken so much of your time and we really appreciate it. The last thing that I will ask is, when you're doing that kind of training, so especially aerobic training, one, how important is it to have some sort of heart monitor on? And two, I've been hearing a lot of backlash on these kinds of things, like Apple Watches and fitness watches and stuff like that. Like, how inaccurate are they?
Well, actually, I mean, the accuracy, here I am with the Polar as well, but the accuracy of whether you're using a watch, or there's even the rings now, that Aura ring, and they're pretty good. Okay. They're pretty, in the end, a lot of times this equipment is tested or validated against the gold standard. That's how you determine accuracy, and the gold standard is a heart rate monitor, or in fact, actually, the gold standard for heart rate is ECG, where they actually have electrodes on the skin that are measuring not the heart rate, but the electrical activity of the heart. So heart rate monitors were tested against ECG, and some of these are either tested against the monitors or against the ECG. They're pretty accurate. You can test them, and you can try them out or whatever to see if again, wear the watch and wear a monitor, and there's ways to check. But I wouldn't worry so much about accuracy. How important is it? It gives let's say, how important is heart rate? I'll say heart rate gives a physiological measure, a direct physiological measure of the intensity of training. So if you don't do that, then you're going to have to measure intensity of training in another way, which is sometimes indirect. The simplest, maybe you guys have heard this, or even I've talked to you about it at one point, but rating of perceived exertion, or RPE, literally we would ask you, how hard was the workout? Out of 10, or out of, and you assign a number to it, and okay, that's fine. I mean, that's a way to determine how you responded to the exercise, but it's subjective. You're just giving a number. You're not quantifying it, and so the heart rate, it gives you that. It gives you that direct physiological measure. As long as you're comfortable and you trust the accuracy, it's something that can't lie, and it's very objective. So I think it's useful to use for sure during training, and we like to use it also to prescribe training. So for example, we'll say, if there's an interval run, then the idea is during the interval the heart rate should be at a certain level. During the rest period, we can kind of track how it went when you recovered. If it's a continuous exercise, run or bike or whatever, you can try to spend a certain amount of time in one of the different zones. Usually zone 1 is starting at 50% of max and going up to 60. There's a range of 10%, and then zone 2 and 3 go up in blocks of 10%. So you can use it to quantify intensity, to prescribe training. Also, and it's interesting, a recent paper that was sort of comparing heart rate versus GPS as a way to measure intensity of actual soccer training and games. And maybe 5 or 10 years ago, you guys would probably remember this, that GPS became super popular, and it still is, and all of that. But there are significant issues with the accuracy of GPS, no matter what. GPS, it's accessing a satellite signal and determining position and all that, sometimes the accuracy, like the margins for error or whatever, can be very high. And so if you're trying to really stick to GPS metrics as a way to prescribe training, but the accuracy isn't there, it can be a little bit limited that way. Also, GPS is not a physiological measure. It's not a direct physiological measure. GPS tells you how much you ran, but it doesn't tell you how you responded to that running. So in any case, this paper was making the point that, in fact, heart rate, the old school, heart rate measures that people have been doing for over 30 years now are still probably the best to quantify load. First, because they're direct, physiological measure, and second, because they do have, better accuracy and they're more stable. So a couple things maybe, and again, I mean, it's not my paper, but it's actually done by a real top sports scientist, and I'll call him a colleague, and he's a friend. I presented at a conference with him, and I know him very well. And anyway, essentially what they said was that athletes, soccer players specifically, should aim for at least 30 minutes per week where they are at the highest heart rate zone, which is the zone between 90 to 100%. Okay, the red zone, you call it. At least 30 minutes per week. That's a way to build and maintain aerobic fitness up to a sort of a high standard. And then if you want to improve on that, then you can do an additional 10 minutes a week. And so, that's a nice, simple standard if you're using a heart rate monitor.
But you don't want to overtrain.
Canadians are so far from overtraining, the word should not be in our vocabulary. Okay, yeah. We're undertraining, all of us. We're undertraining. So yeah. Don't worry about that. In fact, go to the red zone and stay there until you feel like you're going to die, and then just stop before you die. How about that? That's the untechnical way to do it. All right.
Yeah. That's a great way to wrap it up here.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Richard, for
Richard.
taking the time. It's always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. I'm sure we'll have another episode coming up soon. But thank you so much for being here.
All right.
All right.